this meeting of Economic Development Committee meeting. It's April 6th, 2021. We will not have Mr. DiNardo in attendance, but we do have Mr. Thompson, Mr. Bonzo, and myself. Tonight, we will be talking about CRA for the PLK site, and we'll go ahead and let you guys start.
Good evening, everybody. I know that last week, Andy Rosart, who's out of town this week, gave a little bit of an update on the project generally and the financing structure, so I'll just give a basic overview of that, but if you have questions, but just to give some context for where we are on that today. So it's a little more complicated. There's basically three elements. One is that we're going to exempt the residential portion of the property of this project for 15 years from tax. There's a TIF. It's going to overlay that. That will start generating TIF revenue in years 16 through 30 that will be used to pay for some of the public infrastructure. And there will also be a new community authority that will be established to pay some of the debt service that is due during the exemption period of the CRA. So if you have questions about that, let me know. But where we are today, like you said, we're going to talk about the CRA briefly. The process of the CRA we're doing in conjunction with the procedure for the TIF. So a TIF, as I think everybody knows, requires school board approval, or at least the structure of the TIF that we would like to establish here. So the school board approval, that process to get their approval requires first 45 business days notice. They have asked that in connection with the TIF notice, we also include the CRA notice, which is required under the CRA statute. So I just got Keith's signature on the notice. We're going to send over notice to the school board tomorrow. That notice will include a notice that we're going to exempt the property pursuant to the CRA. We're going to establish the TIF, and that will start the clock ticking for the school board. The school board, starting then, we've given them 45 business days notice. 14 days prior to when we have proposed that we pass this legislation, they will have to have certified resolution of their own to us, assumedly approving the structure that we sort of work out. Hopefully that process will be much shorter than 45 days. We've asked them in our notice, or requested, that they waive that notice period. But they did want to go through the formal process of providing that notice in accordance with the statute. So that will be provided to them tomorrow. We'll send over a courier. Hopefully soon thereafter, there will be some more, I don't know if formal is the right word, but a conversation with them now that they've received what they requested, which is the formal notice. So after that, we'll have that discussion. We'll work out what their compensation arrangement will be. Once that is established, we'll be back to establish the TIF, have any discussions that you all would like to have as a committee or the council at large, sort of approve that school compensation structure, the TIF generally, as well as the CRA agreements. So hopefully it wasn't too long-winded, but that's basically where we are. If you get a call from anybody at the school board wondering what's going on, it may be triggered by the deliver of this notice tomorrow, because that's sort of what they've asked for to more formally get this thing kind of going. And I think that's stuff we've gone through before, but that's the update of where it is right now. But any questions you have, I'd be happy to answer.
You guys have questions?
I mean, I've got kind of like some things that I would like to kind of see added to the development agreement, or whatever the agreement is that we have with PLK in exchange. I don't know if that's appropriate now, or if you want to wait till a little bit later in the meeting.
Well,
is there any questions for him?
Oh, no, not for him.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would say if you all, I don't know if you want to do that right now or some other time, but as we've said before, anytime that, I know Tom's not going to be here, but maybe through Catherine, if you have thoughts, or is Sharon?
Catherine and Sharon, yeah.
Catherine and Sharon at the city. Any time you have thoughts about the stuff, or input on the project, or the incentives, or what we're doing here, feel free to send that over and communicate it, because I believe that Andrew is working on a development agreement. We also have these CRA agreements that it could go in there too, but if you have thoughts about what you want to involve in this, the sort of arrangement between the city and the developer, just let us know, and we'll work that in and discuss it with a larger group or whatever you would like to have that at least considered by the larger council.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Okay.
Great. All right.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming.
Okay, so I can be glad to answer any specific questions you have to the CRA on why the terms are what we have. We've done return models, provided all those to the city. We've also provided detailed financials of what the request is for the TIF. So estimated net proceeds after paying fees, reserves, everything else is about an $8 million TIF on about between $9 and $10 million issuance. Based on some feedback from the school board, we adjusted what we were going to include in the TIF because they asked us to exclude certain items and they may ask us to exclude more. Rough proceeds need to spend on true TIF improvements is actually $11.8 million, so PLK is going to have to fund that gap. So that's part of why we have that CRA abatement as well. All of Phase 1 A and B, just so you understand from a high level, actually is a negative return from a cash-on-cash standpoint without the abatements, and is roughly 9% consolidated with the abatements. So we're not even a double-digit return. The majority of that return comes in the office and future land values as well. So we did, like I said, we provided all those metrics. We provided full budgets to the city. We meet every Wednesday morning and make sure that the staff and administration has what they need. And be glad to answer any specific questions that you may have.
So I would love to go, if it's okay, Mr. Gaddy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you said a lot of facts just right there. Just
Yeah.
So let's kind of just, I mean, start from the beginning. So $8 million TIF. Can you just explain like what is included in the $8 million? And then you said $9 to $10 million issuance.
Correct. So, I mean, what you get out of the issuance is there's significant legal costs. The city's legal. There's lots of legal costs. You have to have a reserve allocation, so they're going to make you have sufficient interest reserves or things like that that are actually held back off the top. So the net proceeds are roughly $8 million or so. What is actually included in there? So that's everything from stormwater, detention, public utilities, sidewalks, public street lighting, basic public infrastructure that would need to take place. The city itself isn't actually lending the money in. So the TIF improvements must be truly public improvements that the public has full access to, and we're using that TIF to fund those improvements today versus the city coming out of pocket to put a public improvement in place.
And on the site, you're actually adding, if I'm thinking straight, you kind of almost have an horseshoe and then extended horseshoe, right?
Correct. All the public roads will go in up front. So that's everything all the way back by the highway, all the detention, all the access off Beach Street, everything. So, I mean, some of the high-level numbers, you have about $2.3 million just in roads and curb cuts. I mean, you've got hundreds of thousands of dollars in public sidewalks that are just in the public right-of-way. Whether you have tree grates, all of that stuff that is truly public that would normally be in the public right-of-way is included in that number.
And then that includes running all the sewage, water lines, all those kind of things?
Correct. So, but it's only the public portion. So once we actually would like pull off of that line directly to
Right.
say our apartment
Yeah, to go
building, that
to the
can't
building.
count.
Yeah.
That's on us.
Right.
This is just truly the public mains and utilities in the right-of-way.
Okay, excellent. You said then $11.8 million funded.
Roughly correct.
What do you mean by funded?
I'm sorry?
Could you just explain that number? Like,
So yeah, I mean, there's a pretty detailed budget that they'll provide the city, but yeah, so we have a full detailed construction budget that has an AIA form that's provided to us by HTC Construction. This is a public document. It is a guaranteed maximum price, not to exceed. Anything above that is PLK coming out of pocket. So you will have a true document that tracks to what those public expenses are.
okay, so these are items that you all have, that PLK has identified as public, essentially public improvements to the property.
Yeah, I mean, we don't, PLK specifically, I mean, we tell you roughly what they are. It's actually governed by the Ohio Revised Code.
Okay, no, that's fine.
Public
So 11,
improvement is.
that's what the 11.8 million is. Okay. And then you were saying 9% return.
That's on the whole project for Phase 1.
For Phase 1, the whole project for Phase 1.
So Phase 1A, Phase 1B.
What specific parts of 1B? Is that that mixed-use building?
The mixed-use building plus what you have was the 3 flat buildings on that lot as well.
The 3 lot buildings, sorry.
So there were 2 buildings, kind of Phase 1B. They were kind of side by side on that site map.
Okay. Okay, so you said 9% return on that, and that's with the full CRA and TIF.
Correct. Without the abatement, it's negative.
And the 9%, that's not discounting any like net present. That's not bringing it to any kind of net present value. That's just a straight 9%.
Yeah, so the way it's calculated for these purposes is a little different. They say, what is your annual cash flow after debt service to the equity investment?
Okay.
So that's how they calculate it on a CRA basis.
Okay, I just want to make sure there wasn't like
Yeah.
any like IRR kind of like discounting or
Nope.
anything like that.
No, it's a governed calculation there.
Okay. Gotcha. And then, could you talk about for the office/hotel pads, the two there, the commercial pads there closest to the highway? I think you said that you all had at one point started the advertise, or at least started the work to advertise those. Could you provide an update on that?
Correct. We've done two different things. We're talking to a potential out-of-town office developer about a joint venture there. That way, it kind of brings a little more credibility to national tenants, if that's what makes sense. We've also looked at going ahead and hiring a broker. We have their application. We just honestly haven't done it because until we start, I don't know when I can tell people their buildings can start. So it's pretty hard to go tell an office tenant, yeah, I'll be ready in 9 months or 12 months or whatever it's going to take until I know we're physically starting on the site. So it's very difficult and premature until we know when the roads are going in and when they're going to be completed. Because then we can start scheduling out how long it would take to physically get those buildings built and when they could truly take occupancy. So it's kind of I'd love to market it, but it's pretty difficult to market right now. But the contracts are ready. Once we know we're started and once we have a true timeline, then we can start marketing that.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I mean, I do, but I don't want to like keep going. Is that okay?
No, you're not. Just
Go
go
for it.
ahead.
Okay, cool. So I've got 4 items that I've kind of identified in my head that I would like to see, I feel like I'd like to see. I mean, I think probably in the development agreement, just to make me feel comfortable with it, but potentially, you know, if you want to work those out in some separate agreement too, or some separate way. Some of them are probably pretty easy. First one is, so when we did the Rookwood, some of the different Rookwood, I guess, arrangements. So you see on there, they say City of Norwood on it, and the same thing with Linden Point. So I'd like for us in this development agreement, you know, we didn't require it in the, I think we did the final PD, but in the development agreement, I'd like City of Norwood basically to be added to those, like if you have like the big Factory 52 insurance signs, just like we have at Paycor and other places, I'd love to see City of Norwood added to it somewhere. So underneath. So I mean, I can give you a picture. I don't have it with me, but I'll send you a picture of the Rookwood sign.
I'm familiar with it. So what I would say is this: listen, every advertisement, every public relations thing, everything we do, we've talked about Norwood, and we're going to continue to do that.
No, I hear you.
Yeah, as far as physically changing our logo, like the logo.
No, it's not changing the logo. It's not changing the logo. That's not what
Yeah.
we're asking for. I think it's just asking for it to be added to the signage when you enter the development. So.
Yeah, and what I would talk about the entry signage, and we have very specific sign package that will come back before City Council, so you will be able to see that. That is a separate approval that we will be back for, say, the next 6 to 9 months. So if that's something we need to address at that point, we can.
Okay, well, okay, we can continue that conversation then. So we've talked about this at a previous meeting. You know, I still have strong concerns about long-term parking in the office and hotel pads. So without there actually being an office and hotel there, so my big concern is just getting basically, I don't want any of that parking to be there personally, because I don't want, you know, PLK or whatever, the users of the site to, I guess, be used to that, right? And then you all have to take that away from somebody. So I would prefer that not be long-term parking at all until the office and hotel pads are developed. So.
Well, let's start with the one change the major changes happened, and you'll see this in the site plan, is we've added an additional 300 space garage we're now paying for. So we have added additional parking down south on Kenilworth that hopefully should alleviate some of that concern. And as we've said from day one, we understand that office user will likely build a second garage. That's why it's a completely separate TIF agreement, completely separate everything. But we are adding roughly 150 to 160 additional spaces to that southern portion of Kenilworth that we made that decision to a couple weeks ago. So that'll be on your revised site plan when you see it. But as far as not planting it, I mean, we need to leave the asphalt there from a staging purpose. We are going to have some detention that we have to deal with there. And other than leave it as a grass field, I'm really not sure what I should do with that. I also don't want to necessarily take up asphalt that's already there, and then you have dirt that's exposed that potentially could get wet, and you got to undercut it once you start construction. Like, I understand where you're coming. At the same time, I have constructability issues that I have to contend with.
Okay, so are you planning then on, I mean, because, you know, we've got the apartment buildings that are right, I guess, next to Multicolor, or the closest to Multicolor on the south side of the lot. I mean, are you planning on some of those people then parking right now where the office and...
No, we have a separate parking garage for them now.
Well, I know you have a separate parking garage. I guess the concern is then, are you building parking lots there? I mean, in phase one, are you going to have
No.
parking on? So I guess I'm just curious what your concerns are then from not having long-term parking after construction's over.
Well, if I have asphalt out there, I
phase two.
can't tell people not to park. I mean, it is not a designated parking lot for phase one, but I'm also going to leave the asphalt where it sits right now.
So, I mean, I would argue that, are you putting, I mean, I guess, is there asphalt there right now?
Yeah, there is.
Gotcha. And you're not going to touch it basically?
We're likely going to leave it, just so we don't expose the soil.
Okay. That's fine. We can continue that too, I guess.
I don't understand your concern. You're afraid that people will park there?
No, I just don't want that to be, I mean, I literally don't want 15 years from now to the office and hotel pad not be developed, and literally that's just used for parking for the rest of the development. I mean, that is my biggest concern on it. Like, I want to make sure that those pads I think that's like probably the most critical thing for the city is that those pads eventually get developed. I mean, we're not going to be getting as much income from.
From a risk reward standpoint, a project like this, you typically want to see between 16 and 21% return. So 9% consolidated means we have to do something with that. There's not enough return in this project to just let that sit there. So it is in our best interest to develop that lot out. Now, I can also tell you, I can't promise you when an office tenant's going to come right now.
Oh, I hear it.
But it will be our best, it's in our best interest to develop those lots.
Okay. So another item is that right now the city of Norwood has, we've got an ordinance that kind of in place that basically we're asking apartment owners to provide the tax department basically just a list of tenants so they can send mailings to the tenants saying, hey, make sure you file your taxes with the city. Would you all be okay continuing that?
I mean, if there's an ordinance, we'll comply with whatever ordinance the city set forth. So I don't know why we would have an issue doing that, James.
Okay. No, I'm just wanting to.
Yeah, I mean, if that's a city ordinance, we will comply with all ordinances. I know the fire department gave us something new 2 days ago. We're going to make some changes based on their comments. And I mean, I understand you guys make your money off of income tax revenues, and that's
it's just super important for us, man. So yeah, you're going to hear a lot of. It's just what I think about. So, okay, that's good. Can you provide an update to us on the clock tower and potentially having public access to it?
Yes. So right now the clock tower is in the is a part of the TIF. So that's the way we proposed to the school. The school said it's going to go there. So right now our goal is actually we went through multiple design iterations saying, do we pull the elevator out? What do we do? How do we get ADA access? Ultimately, the best solution was the original design we had, which is going right up through the middle. So right now, our plans are to put it right up through the middle. Now, what I will tell you is, should the school district say this can't be a part of the TIF or something else, we have to basically, we'll clean it up, we'll make the clock tower work, and there just won't be public access. But provided we take public funds, there will be public access to that clock tower.
Gotcha. And I would say that if that is something that you all are getting pushback on, I mean, I think it's something that needs to be told to us, because I personally believe that that's a critical piece of the whole thing, is to allow the public to be able to access that. And again, in whatever hours it might be, you all can set that. But I just think it's a very important part of this whole thing is, I've had a chance to go up there and see it. I think it's a great view. I think it's going to be a really nice piece for Norwood residents, especially long-term Norwood residents that may not have ever had a chance to go up there.
Yeah, the GMP provided to the city as well as the school district cited roughly $2.5 to $2.8 million to put that elevator in. So I think that's why if it's not a part of the TIF, I just can't do that. There's not enough money to do it. But provided that it's in there, which so far everybody has said there is no issue, that is exactly the way it'll be.
Is there still issue with having two forms of egress?
No, so we've worked on that as well. So you'll have an internal stairwell that goes through the entire thing.
Cool. Is that kind of how Summit is set up?
Very similar, but Summit's detached. Ours will be inside the existing core.
Cool.
Yep.
Awesome. That's what I got for now. Thank you.
Huh?
Yeah, that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Okay. Anything, Eric? All right. Sounds good.
Thank you.
So,
Thanks for coming.
what do we need? I guess this might be for you all. What do we need to do tonight?
Nothing.
We just need to report out for council meeting next Tuesday?
But again, this is more informational. Really, a lot of this is going to be dictated by what the school board we'll go forward with both the CRA and the TIF have to go to the school board because this CRA is a little bit different. It's 100%, not 49%. So it has to go for their approval first before it comes to you. But this is kind of just introducing you guys, getting you ready, because that will be coming to you once the school's.
Yeah, and we're anticipating asking for 3 readings at your final council meeting in April.
Yeah.
So we just wanted to be really transparent with that up front. I know you guys have had a lot of conversations about not wanting to do that, but it's super imperative that we put shovels in the ground right away. And so we wanted to just get in front of some of those conversations and honestly hear from you if you think there's going to be any issues or if there's any other information we can provide for you ahead of that vote.
So he had mentioned, I mean, the procedure is 45 days, and you're asking the school board to kind of come back a lot sooner than that. That way we would have it by our last meeting this month, and then you guys can get started in May?
Like the next day.
We're planning on putting the excavators on site the 26th and 27th right now.
You're going to have a groundbreaking ceremony?
We will, we're going to hopefully do it in mid-June. We just want more of the COVID stuff to get through people, to get more shots before we can safely get a larger crowd out there because we have a feeling there'll be a lot of people.
But you'll definitely have a date on your calendars for any official groundbreaking. It'll just be not the first day.
Yeah, we're targeting June 24th because I think Ohio's targeting like July 4th to be at 80%. So we're just trying to work with that respectfully.
So the reason why that they have to wait, like Ohio Revised Code actually says that the CRA has to be in place before they can start construction, or they can't use that value, they can't do it. I mean, we've had previous owners in the city that have had trouble.
These last 2 that we did, it was the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. And there's been a business owner that didn't happen, and you probably remember that.
And we'll make sure the rest of your colleagues hear from us that, we're going to be asking for those 3 readings, and if there's anything we can provide in advance. We apologize for the extra ask, but there's nothing we can really do about it.
Sure.
Period.
And that's,
Yeah, we plan to make ourselves available for the council meeting 2 weeks beforehand, as well as the 27th, I think it is there.
yeah, 27th is that one. All right, cool. Yeah, if you guys want to put out any information or maybe go ahead and put out a thing asking for any type of questions, because you're going to be asking for, all 3 now. And then and tell them that, it's hopefully, if the school board is good on this, that we have, we'll be ready to go on the 27th for that. And if anybody's got any questions, concerns that we could address beforehand, that'd be good.
So, I would say to Mr. Gabbard, I think we should just make sure council members, if anybody has any objections, we can schedule special meetings.
Yes.
That's not an issue at all. So, like, if there's anybody that knows that they're going to, we can probably do it like the Thursday before and the Monday and then the Tuesday, whatever it has to be, but we can definitely make sure that
We appreciate that.
happens, yeah.
Yeah, we just need to know ahead of time, though,
Exactly.
so we're not backing you up doing special meetings the next couple of nights.
Hopefully we don't have to do special meetings.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, it is what it is.
We just want to follow the typical procedure. Typically with CRAs, it goes before the Economic Development Committee, you report it out to the full council. This is just a little bit different because it's not the 49%, it's got to go to the schools first. It has to take a detour to the schools and then come back around to you, so.
Sure.
Anyways, that's, And again, the CRA is just an abatement on the improvements, so, the current taxes on the site are going to stay the same. It's just abating, it's an abatement property tax.
Actually, Tom, why don't you come up and I know every time we go through something like this, we give the explanation of what a TIF actually doing. Because a lot of people say, oh man, we're just giving all of our, what are we doing building, letting something be built if we're not getting anything from it? But that's not the case. It's an incentive program, but there's parameters around. We're still getting tax dollars from that. So if you could just explain that, just so people at home will, understand again for those that are watching.
Right. So, again, the first part of this is there's a 15-year CRA. So that's, again, like I said, the abatement on the improvement for the CRA part.
And that's going to be covering the whole site, or?
So it varies. So phase 1A is 100%, phase 1B is 65%. And then the office will come back for a completely separate agreement with council.
Okay.
Now, the TIF is a bit different because what it's essentially doing is saying, hey, we have all these public infrastructure needs on the site. It's not an abatement. It's taking the property taxes and saying we're going to put it towards these public purposes.
Right.
And that's typically, the schools generate most of their income from property tax, which is why they get a say, in this process, because they have a vested interest in, how those public dollars are spent. So it'll go to them, they're going to, go over it, and then it'll come back around to you all. But that's kind of the process. Essentially, you're diverting instead of an abatement, it's more of a diversion of property tax revenue to cover those public infrastructure needs.
So just to put it in like kind of plain terms, yeah, if you want to come on up.
No, I was just going to say that a lot of times people look at this and they say, oh, you're giving away our tax dollars. But, according to PLK, for example, and based on the facts, the concept is that without this, potentially wouldn't be there.
Right.
So if there wasn't a development, especially here where you have a site that was having obviously environmental problems, that there is no revenue. So people have this misconception that you're getting a tip for $10 million and you're just like going over and writing somebody a check for $10 million. The whole purpose is basically that those tip dollars are to enable the project to happen. And in the long term, it will be a tax generator for the betterment of the schools, the city, and the other taxing districts, or taxing authorities that overlay this project. So if anybody is actually watching, that's what I would say is a big misconception when you hear about these things,
Right.
Especially nowadays in the newspaper with the citizens in particular. There's no money we can just, instead of doing this, we do something else. Tip dollars are specifically to be used to support the project that is exempted, which is what we're doing. So I just wanted to,
Right.
add that to it. That's an important part of the concept, I think.
This particular site, I know that you guys I don't know how much the schools are currently getting in property tax revenue, but it's only a few $1,000s, right?
It's about $2,000 a year total.
From that site is what
Yeah,
they're currently
so
getting.
Our minimum payment is like $2,000 a year, and I think we're guaranteeing them, if I remember right, like between $100,000 and $150,000 a year going forward. So it's a monster multiple of what they currently receive.
Right.
Because we can't abate taxes on the land. So no matter what, the land is now going to naturally increase in value.
Right.
So they're going to get all that additional money from what we're putting into the site. I would also note too, when they keep talking about the environmental issue, the important thing to note here is, and this is what we talk to the schools about, the site, because we're going through a HAZBAT program, automatically will qualify for 100% 10-year abatement, no matter what. So what we've asked the schools is to help us extend that additional 5 years, essentially to help us. The other thing I'll say too is, because we have this TIF in place, essentially we're getting about an 80% abatement, because somehow debt service to that TIF has to be made. So just so everybody is aware, we are taking that tax abatement savings and making payments on the TIF as a loan.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so I mean, again, it's, when you look at it, again, it's really about trying to get, especially in this case, you got to say, Norwood is not, it's a lot different, I guess, in the sense that, we don't have a bunch of vacant land with a for sale sign out in front and cornfields where you can just build right away. It takes a lot of work, and they put a lot of work into remediating the site. So, again, this is to try to help the project move forward. And
So I just wanted to underscore, the first 15 years is a tax abatement. The community reinvestment area, the CRA that we're talking about, is the tax abatement on the increase in value, not taking anything away from the current value.
Mm-hmm.
The TIF is 30 years, but it really only starts from year 16 to 30. And that the payments are made, the tax payments are made, but they're put into a TIF fund, tax increment financing fund, to be used for public improvements.
Right.
So those taxes are paid, but they're put into a fund for public improvements. So that is not an abatement of, those taxes are still paid.
being paid, correct? Yeah.
They are not paid in the normal way, i.e. to the school district. They cover the public infrastructure. So, because the costs are so expensive for a project like this. So, and that, in the case of the city of Cincinnati, I used to work for the city. Oftentimes, they'll help with the acquisition of property as well, because it's so expensive to do these kinds of projects. Obviously, the city of Norwood does not have those kinds of resources. It's kind of mind-boggling when you go to places like College Hill and you see the kind of cash, in addition to tax incentives, that the city of Cincinnati has participated in those projects, along Hamilton Avenue. It's in the millions. So, in addition to tax incentives. So, that is how these kinds of projects work.
You can go on the auditor's site and look up the distributions currently, but if the schools are only getting $2,000, I bet it's probably even way less for us, the city.
Right.
I mean,
and the city,
we get some
of
property
Norwood,
tax, but not.
I mean, their biggest source of revenue obviously is income tax. That's why the schools pay closer attention to the property tax, because that's their biggest source of revenue. So, but in the long run, they'll benefit from this project, obviously.
Like a nice clock tower that you can go up in, like all that kind of stuff, the dog parks, all of that kind of stuff will certainly benefit the schools.
Great. Anything else?
Actually, I did have a question about and maybe Nick needs to answer this. The planned community, is that what it's called? What's the entity called that's going to be?
New Community Authority.
New Community Authority. Can we talk about what potentially some of the revenues that New Community Authority might generate, what they would be used for?
Yes, so the new community authority is going to serve two purposes. One, because of the TIF, how we have to figure out a master way to get the repayment back. So they basically want an assignment of the excess tax cash flow. So what that will do is it'll essentially add a 1% sales tax on all food and beverage sales on the site. So ultimately, if we're not driving revenues, there's no money to come in. But what do we need them? We need them for two different reasons. Number one, if you have this clock tower and everything else that's there, you have to maintain it. So there has to be a fund of money to operate the elevator for the next 30 years or whatever it's going to be. Otherwise, somebody has to be responsible for that bill because it is now a public space. So the second thing is to allow us to cover programming. So whether that's Christmas trees and events for families in the park and everything else. This is no different than what you see at the banks and other areas. So with that new community authority allows us to take those funds, and with the new community authority there will be city council members that sit on the panel as well as developers that sit on the panel. I believe it's 5 to 7 people.
Is it residents too? Or no?
There's a specific rule on how it's all set up. So this is very common in Columbus, and actually they're starting to do it down in Cincinnati now, where they can add an additional sales tax that allows us then to put these events on and drive other business back to the area. So that's what it is. It's a sales tax that goes on top of the existing sales tax, and it's 1%. So.
Gotcha.
So you walk into our brewery, you buy a beer, at the bottom of your receipt, it'll say what that extra dollar is. And
You spend $100, it's $1 more.
Yeah.
Have you done any anticipation of what that generates? And is there any, well, I have that question. The second question is there any chances that it gets used for other things, paying off the?
No, you spell out in the new community authority specifically what their funds are for.
Okay.
So we can't just go say, I'm going to go put that in my pocket. That's not how that, it's basically a mini city council within the city of Norwood. There's a council that governs all that. So that's what the new community authority is.
Okay. And then the other question I have, one more question. So, there's actually probably a couple more in this. Was there any agreement that you all made with regard to phase 2, like the office and retail pads? Did you have any agreement with the board or the school board or any informal agreement with them about how those TIFs would be handled when we get to that point? Or is it really, because you said that you all had some kind of agreement on phase 1B, that you were going to do something.
So retail does not receive a CRA. No retail, no office is part of the CRA right now. So the retail on the site will pay full taxes. The only thing that's allowed to be in the CRA, based on all the discussions we've had, is the residential. So the brewery, the market hall, everything will pay full tax load.
Okay, but there's no agreement because building the office building later, we're probably going to need to use some CRA capacity, right, to do that when those tenants get in there.
That'll be a completely separate
Exactly, so there's been no informal agreement on.
Nope,
okay.
never had a
Basically,
conversation.
we'll just be doing this process all over again once we meet our tenants and know that there's going to be a plan that will come to you with what we need to make that happen.
Okay, I just want to make sure, that we just protect any revenue that can help.
They're completely carved out of the CRA. So the CRA has a map on it.
Yep.
And that portion of the parcel is completely carved out as a completely separate agreement. We can't reallocate funds there. We can't do anything like that.
They put in their applications, I believe, different, essentially what would be covered in each CRA. There's 5 separate CRA applications is kind of how
Gotcha. Okay, so the other thing is that I remember hearing that, so any excess revenue from the TIF is going to go to the schools, like that was, is that correct? Like, that there's not going to be any extra revenue to?
That's not necessarily true. Obviously, we're going to have a 15-year window here to figure this out, or to see how it plays out. But no, the excess revenue that's in the TIF, I don't know exactly how the bond structure is going to be at this point, but if there were excess revenue at some point, so the schools will get their piece, the amount will go to the debt service. The excess would be like general TIF revenues. It'll be, allocated in a fund of the city. It'll be used for basically public infrastructure improvements to benefit its property, but it will not be given to the developer other than to pay the debt service for the bonds to finance this initial public infrastructure.
Yeah, the school.
Theoretically, at the end of the TIF, then that would revert to the city general fund in 30 years or whatever, 35 years or something.
But I thought something was said, though, at the last meeting, that in order to get the schools on board with this, that if there were extra revenues generated by the TIF, that they would get paid out to the schools.
Well, we have not.
And you may want to come to the microphone just so the people at home.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure. The school compensation agreement has not been fully vetted. I mean, there's a general idea of what we need in order to, be able to sell this debt to finance the public infrastructure improvements. But the school compensation agreement has not been fully vetted. I mean, we've had some informal discussions, and we're trying to do that in order to keep this process moving. But that agreement is going to come down to some extent to what the school board agrees to. And if they demand, that they get reimbursed because they're getting less than full compensation now, I mean, I think that's something that we would discuss with them. But that agreement, that school compensation agreement, would come back to the council to be voted on in connection with the adoption of the TIF legislation, as well as the CRA.
So you understand, because it's 100% abatement, schools are asking to be compensated
Sure.
in lieu of that, and that can be anything, really. So that is being negotiated right now.
Okay.
It is not yet negotiated.
And I don't have any, I don't think that I have been specifically asked, hey, because we're not getting all of the money we would have otherwise received, we want to be repaid for that. I don't think that is.
So I just thought that was part of, I mean, I must have just misheard. I just thought I'd heard somebody say that the schools, just to make them feel good, that there's not going to be a whole bunch of excess in the TIF that just gets stuck there, that it would get paid out to them.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if there was some kind of windfall, basically, to the city, that because they are taking a haircut on what they would otherwise receive, that they would want to at least have some kind of the upside on that. Now, I don't know exactly what's contemplated here, and Andy Brossard would probably have a better.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, and I'll go back and rewatch the meeting too before the next one. So then the other question, this could be for Nick, I don't know, but so the public improvements that are made on the site, so the streets that are paved, the sidewalks that are done, during the 30 years of the TIF, who pays for maintaining those?
We do.
Okay, and that's going to be in the development agreement or in the?
Here's the thing, it's actually, because of the way this is set up, the Port Authority is actually going to take title of those, because Norwood didn't specifically want the roads or sidewalks. So the Port Authority is going to hold the title, and they have a master easement essentially over it, so it's their easement over that land to show it's truly public land, and all the maintenance is handled by us.
Okay, I mean, is Norwood doing street, the salting and
Nope.
you're handling all that too?
Nothing.
Okay. And then what happens at the end of the 30 years?
It reverts back to us.
So the roads specifically, PLK will own the roads?
Because at the end of 30 years, the master lease of the Port Authority goes away, as far as I know. Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, the master lease goes away at that point.
I'm not sure what the agreement with the Port Authority is.
Yeah.
Okay. So what about like police access and fire? Like, so basically, I think we have an agreement with Rookwood where the police officers can basically just those roads are essentially considered like public roads, like throughout some of the Rookwood area. Have you all talked about that? Is there some kind of a
We have talked about it at a high level. I don't know any resolution from that.
Okay, but you're not going to have any objections to like working with us to make sure that the police can access anytime they...
Yeah, I mean, the police are going to be able to access that area there. There wouldn't be any reason that the police wouldn't be able to access public roads.
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm confused. They're public, not owned by Norwood, though, so that's why I'm just trying to understand. It's just a new concept for me on having the port own them, so, okay. No, that makes me feel better about that, knowing that they're going to be maintained in some other way, so, perfect. Yeah, that's all I have, Mr. Gabbard.
And like I said, we will be back to have a more final, further discussions on getting this. We're trying to focus on getting the CRA here because that does, the TIF and the financing of those, but they don't have the same implications where you need to have that in place necessarily to start construction. So I fully plan on being more involved too in negotiating final details as well. And so this is more, like I said, this is a status update for where we are to keep the CRA in process. We'll be, discussing this with the school district. We'll have to work out that, like we talked about, what their compensation or potential reimbursement will be. That will all be finalized, and it has to be finalized so that they can approve it, because that needs to happen before the CRA agreements are approved by this council, or by the full council.
Okay.
That's the time-sensitive piece.
Right.
Oh, for sure, yeah. No, I understand, I completely,
Because you can get, the tip doesn't really matter as much as far as, you can, construction-wise, you can work on that, but
Okay.
CRA, you have to have that in place.
But again, those questions that come up, I mean, feel free to get a hold of me or Andy or whoever else, Catherine, and any of this stuff. Happy to answer questions that come up that anybody has. I think that everybody agreed that having those responses or the information you need as soon as possible is probably better for everybody. So, and some of those questions, like asked about the roads, that's something I personally don't know either, but obviously these arrangements are all being worked out, and your input is better to be included earlier rather than later.
Absolutely.
yeah.
You know where to find us.
Great, no, thank you. Yeah, and I mean, and again, a lot of these questions are just because I want to make sure that this council doesn't take any action, whether purposely or inadvertently, to do anything that's going to harm the future development, again, of the office pad and the hotel pad, and, or 2 office pads, whatever it ends up being. So it sounds like, I mean, we're in a good spot. But again, it's just wanting to make sure, for sure.
Yeah, after we caught the new lines, those, right, we kind of, we parceled it out essentially, so that the process is completely, right.
Yeah,
Right,
It'll have
that's-
to be, the tip will kick off for each parcel within this, but it's not necessary to have in place right now.
So the TIF will not cover that parcel, if that makes sense.
Right,
It's not
right.
incentivized.
No, that makes sense.
Anything else? We really appreciate it. Thank you all so much. And then shoot us any information or put it out there. Well, if anybody's got questions or anything like that. You guys have anything else?
I'm good.
Good? All right.
Oh, actually, before we do leave,
Yep.
Mr. Perry, can you come up by chance for a second? So could you tell, when is your last day with the city?
It's today.
So
One of his last acts
It is,
that he'll be doing for the city. We do it.
yeah, I just want to say, I mean, from my perspective, I think you have done, I mean, I can't imagine anybody doing a better job during your tenure, I guess it's been about a year now or so, as you have done. I just can't imagine it. Like, I don't know who else could have done a better job with all the stuff that you were juggling. So I just want to tell you, congratulations, job well done, and, I want to wish you the very, very best in whatever your future holds, so.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to work with you all as well, and, I'll still be around. I'll be working remotely, and I've lived in Norwood since 1999. It's my home, so I still want to see good things continue to happen here, so.
Good.
Great, yeah.
We appreciate all the help that you've given us. You've always been very responsive. Anytime that we've sent questions or had requests or anything like that, you've done an excellent job at that. I mean, none of us do a perfect job,
Yeah.
but you've done well. And I thought you served us pretty well. And want to wish you all the best.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Well, thank you, sorry.
That's all. Then concludes this meeting of economic development. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.